The Mediterranean, February 1942. Somewhere beneath the surface, a small British submarine was running quiet, her crew already beginning to whisper that she was cursed. She had arrived in the theatre the previous year under a cloud of early mechanical trouble. Her commanding officer had very nearly been relieved of command after a string of missed opportunities that had made the flotilla staff in Malta wonder whether Upholder and her crew were simply not up to the work. The boat was a U-class submarine, compact, slow, and built for the North Sea, not the deep Mediterranean. She displaced just over 500 tons submerged. Against the heavily escorted supply convoys feeding Rommel's Afrika Korps, she looked, on the face of it, entirely inadequate to the task. In 11 weeks of sustained operational patrols, she would help strangle the Axis Lifeline across the central Mediterranean. This is how a submarine her own flotilla had doubted became the most decorated in the entire Royal Navy. To understand why what HMS Upholder accomplished matters, you need to understand what the Mediterranean supply route meant to the war in North Africa in 1941 and 1942. Rommel's Afrika Korps was fighting at the end of a very long logistical tether. Every tank, every artillery shell, every litre of fuel and every ration had to cross the sea from Italy, predominantly through the Sicilian Narrows and onto the Libyan ports of Tripoli and Benghazi. This was not merely an inconvenience to Berlin and Rome, it was the single operational constraint that shaped the entire desert campaign. Rommel himself understood that if the sea route held, he could advance. If it didn't, he would eventually run dry in the desert and stall. The Regia Marina, the Italian Navy, was responsible for protecting that route, and on paper they had every reason for confidence. They operated a powerful surface fleet in the Mediterranean, battleships, cruisers, and a substantial destroyer force. Their light cruisers of the Condottieri class were modern, fast, and well-armed. Ships like the Armando Diaz and her sister the Luigi Cadorna had been completed in the early 1930s, built specifically for the Mediterranean theatre by OTO at La Spezia. The Armando Diaz had been named after the Italian Field Marshal of the First World War, a prestige name for a prestige ship. She had made her reputation on a cruise to Australia and New Zealand between September 1934 and February 1935, a voyage designed to project Italian naval power on the world stage. During the Spanish Civil War, she had operated in the Western Mediterranean, based at Palma de Mallorca and Melilla, accumulating the kind of operational mileage that built crew confidence and institutional familiarity with the sea lanes she would later be asked to defend. By July 1940, she was at the Battle of Calabria, the first major fleet engagement of the Mediterranean War, and in October she had escorted missions to Albania. By December 1940, she had come under direct orders of Supermarina, the Italian naval headquarters, for the specific protection of traffic to Albania. On paper, she was formidable. On paper, she represented exactly the kind of cruiser escort that should make a small, slow British submarine think twice. On paper, an operation using the Armando Diaz in company with the light cruiser Giovanni Dolban near and supporting destroyers to screen a major supply convoy to Tripoli was entirely sound, layered escorts, speed advantage over any submerged threat, and a route through waters they knew well. The submarine waiting for them was HMS Upholder, P-37, a U-class boat of 540-ton submerged displacement with a surface speed of just over 11 knots and a submerged speed of roughly 9. She carried 8 torpedoes. Against a cruiser screen moving at high speed, the geometry of a successful attack was brutally demanding. A U-class boat needed to be almost perfectly positioned before the target came into range, because once an escorted formation was passed and the destroyers had detected a periscope, the margin for error collapsed to nothing. The men who crewed these boats knew that. And yet, something aboard HMS Upholder had shifted. Accounts of what made HMS Upholder exceptional under the command of Lieutenant Commander Malcolm David Wanklyn consistently point to the same thing: Wanklyn himself. He was not a loud officer. Contemporary accounts describe a measured, quiet intensity, a man who trusted his crew completely and in return was trusted absolutely by them. The flotilla staff in Malta had indeed harbored doubts early in his command, when a sequence of attacks had produced no confirmed sinkings and his judgment in certain approach geometries had been questioned. Wanklyn was very nearly replaced. What kept him in command was partly the faith of Captain George Simpson, commanding the 10th Submarine Flotilla at Malta, who argued that patience was warranted and that Wanklyn's technical reading of the data was sound even when the results hadn't yet confirmed it. Simpson was right, and that decision, to keep Wanklyn in place, would prove to be among the most consequential personnel judgments of the submarine war. What the doubters had not fully appreciated was how thoroughly Wanklyn had absorbed every lesson from those early missed attacks. He adjusted his approach geometry, his firing ranges, and the timing of his periscope exposures. He trained his crew relentlessly in the confined, austere conditions of a U-class boat, a type that had been designed primarily for North Sea operations and whose size placed genuine constraints on crew comfort and endurance during extended Mediterranean patrols. The boat ran hot in summer, cold in winter, and was in near constant need of maintenance. Her batteries, critical for the sustained silent running that submarine survival depended upon, demanded careful management on every dive. These were not exceptional circumstances, they were the routine conditions under which Upholder operated throughout her 11-week run of destruction. The crew adapted. They did not merely cope with the constraint, under Wanklyn's hand, they made it irrelevant. Wanklyn's targeting instinct was described by those who observed it as close to uncanny. He had a gift for estimating the target speed, course, and zigzag pattern from a brief periscope observation and then closing the fire control solution in his head against a ticking clock. The mathematics of a torpedo attack at these ranges, firing a weapon traveling at roughly 45 knots at a target that might be making 20 or more, required the attacking officer to fire ahead of where the ship currently was, predicting a point of intersection that might be 800 to 1,500 yards distant. Get the speed estimate wrong by a single knot and the spread open to miss. Against an escorted fast convoy, there was rarely the luxury of a second observation. Wanklyn took his observations, calculated, and committed. The 10th Submarine Flotilla at Malta, the famous 10th, was itself an extraordinary instrument. Operating from a base that was under near-constant air attack throughout 1941 and into 1942, the flotilla maintained patrols through conditions that strained every system of every boat. Upholder was not alone in this work, but she was consistently its sharpest edge. If the story of the Cursed Submarine is to be understood fully, the viewer who finds this account worth following will find that the 10th Flotilla's full campaign history deepens every engagement Upholder fought, and subscribing to the channel means those accounts arrive directly, without searching. Back in the early hours of the 25th of February, 1941, HMS Upholder had positioned herself in the waters near the Kerkennah Islands, off the coast of what is now Tunisia. The convoy to Tripoli was moving under the protection of a screen that included the Armando Diaz, the Giovanni Dole Band Near, and their accompanying destroyers. The cruisers were not merely symbols, they were the heaviest surface units available to protect a convoy whose cargo the Axis High Command considered critical to maintaining Rommel's operational momentum in Libya. At some point in those early hours, the precise minute is not recorded in the sources available, Wanklyn acquired his firing solution on the Armando Diaz. What happened next unfolded with a speed that removed any chance of damage control saving the ship. HMS Upholder fired. The torpedo, or torpedoes, ran true. They struck the Armando Diaz, and within moments of the impact, her magazine detonated. From the moment of that detonation, the Armando Diaz had 6 minutes to live. A magazine detonation aboard a warship is not an explosion in the conventional sense, it is a catastrophic, sequential destruction of the ship's structural integrity from within. The Armando Diaz, a vessel of roughly 5,200 tons, was torn apart. She went down in those 6 minutes with the loss of 484 men. The survivors, in the dark water off the Kerkennah Islands, were all that remained of a ship that 12 hours earlier had been the centerpiece of a cruiser escort. The Giovanni Dole Band Near and the destroyers could do nothing to stop the sinking and little to address the scale of the loss of life in the time available. HMS Upholder, having fired and heard what the crew of a submarine always listens for, the detonation of their weapon followed by the unmistakable sound of a sinking ship, went deep and moved clear. The destroyers would have been hunting. The geometry of escape from a warship screen after a successful attack was as demanding as the geometry of the approach, and the waters near the Kerkennah Islands offered limited depth. Wanklyn brought his boat and his crew home. That single action, the sinking of the Armando Diaz on the 25th of February, 1941, was one engagement in a concentrated period of operations that established HMS Upholder as the dominant offensive submarine of the Mediterranean War. Over her operational career in those waters, Upholder sank or damaged a catalogue of Axis shipping, troop transports, tankers, supply vessels, and now a light cruiser. The total tonnage removed from the Axis supply chain across her patrols was sufficient to constitute a measurable strategic effect. Historians of the Desert Campaign have consistently identified the interdiction of the Libyan supply route as a primary factor in Rommel's inability to sustain his advances, and within that interdiction campaign, the 10th Submarine Flotilla, an upholder within it, was indispensable. The cruiser loss alone removed a significant escort asset from future convoy operations. The cumulative pressure of sustained submarine attack meant that Italian convoy planners were forced to route and schedule under constant threat, adding delays and losses that compounded across the months. For his command of HMS Upholder, Lieutenant Commander David Wanklyn was awarded the Victoria Cross. The citation, while formally restrained in the manner of such documents, made clear that Wanklyn's achievement was not the product of a single fortunate action but of a sustained, calculated campaign of offensive operations prosecuted against a defended enemy under the most demanding conditions the submarine service faced in that war. HMS Upholder was, by the end of her operational career, the most decorated submarine in the Royal Navy, a distinction she has never lost. In April 1942, HMS Upholder sailed from Malta on patrol. She did not return. She was sunk off the coast of Sfax, North Africa, by the Italian torpedo boat Pegaso. The entire crew was lost. Wanklyn was 32 years old. The precise circumstances of her final moments have never been established with certainty. A submarine sunk at sea carries her last log with her. What is known is that she went down as she had fought, in the same waters, against the same enemy, still on patrol. The second HMS Upholder, S-40, was launched in 1986 and designated the lead ship of her class. The name was chosen deliberately, a chain of inheritance running from that compact, supposedly inadequate U-class boat that had strangled the Axis supply route across the central Mediterranean for 11 unbroken weeks in 1941. The Royal Navy understood what it was doing when it assigned that name again. Names carry weight in a fighting service, and the name Upholder carried more than most. The Armando Diaz was found on the seabed around 2009 to 2010, lying on her port side in less than 50 meters of water. Her bow is gone, blown off in the magazine detonation. Her aft turrets remain in place, guns buried in the bottom, pointing at nothing. She has been there since 6 minutes after a British submarine found her in the dark off the Kerkennah Islands, and she will be there long after every account of what happened to her has been forgotten by everyone but those who go looking. They called HMS Upholder cursed, mechanically troublesome, early in her career disappointingly unproductive, her captain nearly relieved, her class too small and too slow for the waters she had been sent to operate in. In 11 weeks, she made the name mean something else entirely. And nobody who ever served in a Royal Navy submarine bearing that name, before or since, would use the word cursed without knowing exactly what it had once cost to change its meaning. If you watched this far, thank you. The history of these boats and the men who sailed them is what this channel is built on, and your time is appreciated. If you'd like to see more accounts of the ships and crews that shaped the war at sea, please subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next story, and consider liking the video to help others find it. There are more overlooked vessels whose records deserve this treatment, and they are coming.